Hello, everyone. Welcome to Financial Aid Night. I'm Brian Glassberg, the supervisor of school counseling. And thank you for coming out. I think you'll find this really informative. I'm going to hand it over now to Miss Karen Kandari. She is school counselor who helped set up this event.
Good evening, everyone. We know that we have some juniors in the audience tonight, as well as, of course, our senior parents. And we have been really working with the kids a lot over the last month, trying to get them ready for their college application process. And as they do that, we as parents, of course, are always concerned about our kids getting into college, but then we're also concerned about how we're going to go about, funding the education. So that's what tonight is all about. We do have a chat enabled, and we have two of us that will be checking the chat and monitoring it and also answering questions as we go along. So please be patient with us. We will try to get to everyone's questions. Before we begin with our main presenter, I'd like to just talk about a few things that are JP Stevens based. So we have a counseling website that most of you, hopefully all of you, have been on before. And if not, this would be a great time for you to check it out. And on the right menu bar, we have a tab titled Financial Aid and Scholarships. And underneath that, you will see current scholarships, which are updated regularly. So as we receive information from different organizations and different colleges, we put them up on the website. So our college counselors update those pretty much daily as they come in. So please check back regularly on that. We also have a resource section with different kinds of websites related to financial aid, which you'll hear about tonight, different websites where you can get other scholarship information, and some websites that have to do with taking student or parent loans. We also have federal and state financial aid resources. And from year to year, those may change slightly. So if you have a child that already went through the process, you may want to just check back in over the next month or so and just make sure that things haven't changed much. We will also be updating that. So what you'll see on there right now will be from last year. And after tonight's presentation, we will be updating those resources as well. And then the final section is paying for college, different presentations that we have done throughout the year, including tonight's presentation, which will be on the website tomorrow. In addition to the website, we have what's called our senior surveys, and those are given out to all seniors around January, and they're due back sometime in February. These surveys will determine their eligibility for scholarships that they cannot apply to outside of this survey. So basically, there's school scholarships, local and community scholarships that are only given through JP Stevens. And those awards and scholarships will be given out on our senior awards night in May. And finally, we come to tonight. And these are just some of the main topics that we're going to be covering. What is financial aid? How do I apply for it? And of course, what types of aid are available? We are going to have Claire Alacio. She is the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management and the Director of Financial Aid at Monmouth University here in Long Branch, New Jersey. And I'm going to turn it over to Claire now.
Thank you very much, Karen. If you'll bear with me for a moment while I get my screen ready to share. That's the correct one. Okay. All right. Thank you all for having me again this year. I'd like to call this presentation Financial Aid 101. The intention of the presentation is to give you a little bit of a taste and some basic knowledge about what financial aid is, how do you go about getting it, what types of financial aid are available, some tricks and tips of the trade, if you will. And we'll have certainly plenty of time for questions throughout and at the end. This is not a recruitment event for Monmouth. This is just purely about financial aid. For the most part, financial aid is the same at one college to another. And Monmouth kind of does business in a fairly standard way. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of here's how we do it at Monmouth. If there is something that might be different at another institution, I will point that out. And if it's something that might vary from institution to institution, you would probably want to check in with the financial aid offices at the school that your son or daughter is interested in. So, okay, what is it that the financial aid office does? We're it's kind of like when you're at Thanksgiving dinner and somebody asks a person what they do for a living, and they just kind of say, oh, I'm in computers, because it just gets a little complicated and it's hard to explain. Financial aid is a profession sort of like that. If I had to boil down what it is that we do, we spend our time evaluating families' need and ability to pay for their educational expenses. We determine what aid they may be eligible for. And then we try to distribute those resources, both federally, state, and institutionally, in a way that is regulatory compliance and that's equitable or fair. We also, and in doing that, we spend a fair amount of time counseling with students and parents, helping them to understand what their options are and what's available to them. We spend some time checking things out and seeing what additional resources we can identify for students. Part of what I do during the day is grant applications and research on other types of aid that we might be able to offer to our students. And then last but not least, necessary evil, we have to account for all the money that's been entrusted to us and that we've awarded to students. And we just need to keep accurate records of how we spent those funds and how they were dispersed. So, okay, what's financial aid? This is an important point for you to hear. Financial aid is any money that helps a student pay for post-high school education expenses. That and the reason that word any is underlined is that can include grants, scholarships, student employment, and loans, both for the student and the parent. I make a point of this because many a time when we offer students financial aid, there's probably going to be a loan in that offer. And the parents will always say to us, but I want financial aid, and loans are financial aid. So I just want you to kind of keep that point in mind when you're dealing with a financial aid office in the future. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do you go about accessing financial aid, or what's the process. First thing in the process is you're going to complete some sort of application. Every institution in the country is going to require that you file the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. The FAFSA will be available for the 23-24 cycle beginning on October 1st. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to run right out and apply on the 1st, but you could if you so chose. There are some institutions that, in addition to the FAFSA, they may also ask you to file the CSS profile. We don't require it simply because there's a fee to file it, and I just don't believe in having people spend money in order to try to access financial aid. So that is definitely something that you would check with the schools that you're interested in to see if they require it. Most schools will publish that on their website to let you know that you need to do that. But if you don't see it, certainly reach out to the financial aid office and ask. Similarly, there are some schools that, in addition to the FAFSA or the CSS profile, they may also have an institutional financial aid application that they want you to fill out. Again, if they are, not many schools do that, but if they are asking for it, usually they're going to advertise that on their website. But again, better safe than sorry. I would contact the aid office and just say, like, I've done my FAFSA. Are there any other forms that I need to do, or any other applications that I need to take care of? Once you do your application, the financial aid office is going to take the information on the application, and they're going to put together something called a financial aid package. The financial aid package is simply the compilation of different types of financial aid that are being offered to the student. And they will communicate that to you in something called an award letter. And the award letter just lists out the types and the amounts of financial aid that you're being offered. So you want to review that. Some schools may require additional documentation of you. If they do, they will reach out. Financial aid people, and I've been in this business a long time, financial aid people love bullet lists, and they will give you a list, a checklist or a box to check, or a bulleted list of here's all the things that we need from you. And trust me when I tell you, if the school needs something from you, they will reach out, and they will make sure to nag you a little bit to get that documentation from you. But if you are asked to supply additional documentation, please try to do it as quickly as possible, because oftentimes the aid office can't move forward with processing your financial aid until they have that documentation. As I said earlier, many financial aid packages are going to include student loans in them. So you're going to need to complete any loan applications or promissory notes and such to finalize those loans. And then once you've done everything, once the academic year starts, those funds will be dispersed or paid to the student's account, and that's how you pay your bill at the institution. It's really, I think sometimes parents, it's a pretty simple process if you read and follow instructions. I think sometimes parents overthink it a little bit and get themselves a little overwhelmed. I would say if you start to feel that way, take a deep breath, read the instructions, and if you're really stuck, call the financial aid office. Okay, so let's spend a minute talking about the applications themselves. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about the 23-24 FAFSA. As I said, you can file on or after October 1st. So to make it a little bit easier, a number of years ago, the federal government decided that you would use what they call prior year. So 2-year-old income data. So if the student is starting in fall of 23, they're using 2-year-old income data from 2021. As you're going through the FAFSA, there will be some questions like your marital status or your assets that the FAFSA is asking for as of the day that you're actually filling the application out. This is another thing that you do want to check with the various colleges and universities that you're interested in. For example, we don't have a deadline, but there are some types of aid that are limited in supply, as you're going to hear in a little bit. And we always do kind of a first come, first served basis, but there are schools that set a priority deadline. So you certainly want to know in advance what that deadline is so that you don't want to miss out on something simply because you didn't do an application on time. So I would definitely check with the schools for the deadlines. This is an important concept. If you have multiple children in school, maybe one's a junior in college and one's about to start their freshman year, you need to do one FAFSA per student per year that you want to have financial aid in. So filing the FAFSA, there are 4 different ways that you could file it. You could file it on the web, and we're going to give you a URL for that. Previously, you used to be able to file it on a mobile app, and that has been discontinued for the 23-24 cycle. The feds were finding that people weren't using it, so they just discontinued it. You could file a paper FAFSA and mail it in. You could do a FAFSA over the phone, or you could work with the financial aid office, and there are some schools that will file it with and for you in their access to the federal data system. While there is no required method, I would absolutely recommend the first one, doing it online. The biggest reason is that you can save it and return to it. Say that you get started and you don't quite finish, you can save it and come back to it. Another advantage to that is it has rollover help text. So if you get a little stuck, you can get some additional information and maybe get some clarification of your question. It enables you to do something called the data retrieval tool, which we're going to talk about in a moment, that will absolutely make your life better. Of the rest of the methods, I would say the paper is probably the least preferred method, or the least desirable method, because it just slows the process down, and it takes longer for the Department of Education to process the paper FAFSAs, and like, who does paper anymore, right? So I would not recommend that, but there are some people that are just not comfortable with doing things online. So certainly do it, but understand that it is going to make your aid take a little bit longer to process. So, okay, I've done a screenshot for you of when you look at the, when you go to the URL that's on the screen, the studentaid.gov .apply for aid, and remember that this presentation will be posted tomorrow, so you'll have access to that link. When you click on that URL, this is a screenshot of what you're going to see. Okay, so yeah, I did tell you about the advantages for doing it online. Okay, so I mentioned the data retrieval tool. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the bigger innovations in financial aid in the last 2 decades. For anyone that works for the federal government, please close your ears for a moment or two. Who would think that 2 departments of the federal government might actually talk to each other? A number of years ago, the Department of Education worked with the Department of the Treasury to enable FAFSA filers who met certain criteria to be able to import their financial data directly from the IRS right onto your FAFSA. And this is really, really good news for a couple of reasons. One, for the person using the data retrieval tool, it makes it faster. You just import the data right from the IRS. It eliminates or reduces the opportunity for error. I mean, how many times have we all, when we're data entering something, we fat fingered it, or we've made a mistake, or we skipped something? Using the data retrieval tool reduces those chances. The other advantage to it is that, recall earlier when I said that the school might ask you for additional documentation. Usually the documentation you're going to be asked for is verification of your income and assets. Well, I can't say it will eliminate that. You will significantly reduce the likelihood that you will be asked to verify your income, because you know what? If the Department of Education got it right from the IRS, you're not going to provide anything that they don't already know. So it may reduce the chance that you'll be asked to verify your data. There's a couple of caveats to this. If you use the data retrieval tool, do not change it once you import it. Just leave it be. Do not change anything. Even if your income is different, remember I said that we're using 2-year-old income. Even if your income for 2022 is different than 2021, do not update it. There's a process to handle that we're going to talk about later in the presentation. But those last 2 points are very important. Now that I've gotten you all excited about the data retrieval tool, there are some instances, as I've noted on this screen, where you can't use the data retrieval tool. If you didn't indicate that you filed a tax return, you're not going to do it. If you are married on or after January 22, January 1, 22, you can't. If the first 3 digits of your social security number are 666, you can't. You can't if you filed a non-US tax return. If you filed head of household or filed married filing separately, or you didn't enter a social security number, or you entered all zeros for the social security number, it will kick it out and it won't let you use the tool. So, and this is a concept that's also very important that you can do now before October 1st. One of the things that you're going to need to file the FAFSA is an FSA ID. In essence, it's a user ID and password. Each student needs their own unique ID. However, only one parent is required to have an ID. So if you have multiple children in your household, the same parent ID can be used for multiple children, but each child needs their own ID. The reason for that being is, think about the FSA ID as a digital signature, because you will be using that to sign the FAFSA digitally. You'll also use the ID throughout the the student's enrollment to monitor financial aid. And even after the student graduates, they can use it to monitor their grants and loan totals with the Department of Ed, and that's how they'll log in. So you can do that ahead. I've given you a screenshot and the URL for where you go to apply for an ID. You probably, once you have it, keep it in a safe place. If you lose it, all is not lost, but it will certainly make your life easier if you just keep track of it. Remember that this is an ID for a federal data system, so don't share passwords or let somebody else use it. Just one ID for the parent and one for each child. Okay, so you're getting ready to do your FAFSA. A couple of things, in addition to the data retrieval tool, a couple of things that will make it a little bit easier for you is if you gather your information ahead of time and you have it all in front of you when you're sitting down to work on it. This particular slide gives examples of information that you should have available when you sit down to do the FAFSA, because there's nothing worse than you've sat down to try and work on it and, oh shoot, I need, my bank statement. Just try to gather all your records ahead of time. You need a SOCH number, your, if applicable, your alien registration number, your tax returns if you can't use the DRT, records of cash, savings, checking, investments. Please note that your home, at least for the FAFSA purposes, your home is not considered an investment. However, on the CSS profile, it is. So these are examples of the sorts of information that you should have available. Another thing that you might find helpful is something called the FAFSA on the Web worksheet. And this worksheet is available online that you can take a look at it. It's kind of a preview, if you will, of the FAFSA. And some parents have been successful with just taking the worksheet and sort of handwriting out their answers first, so that when they actually sit to do the FAFSA, it's just they've done all the thinking and it's just a matter of data entry. The FAFSA on the Web worksheet also is an opportunity if you don't understand, since it's a preview, if you don't understand something, you can get some clarification during business hours before you're actually sitting down to do the FAFSA. Again, you don't have to do it. It's just a tool that might help make things a little bit easier for you. Okay, so you've gone and you've done your FAFSA. When you click submit and you sign it using your FSA ID, this is a sample of the confirmation page that you will receive. So again, I just share this with you so that you have a frame of reference and you know what to expect and what it looks like. However, even when you click submit, you're not quite done yet. If you are a resident of the state of New Jersey, as you all are, who will be attending school at a New Jersey public or private institution, there's some additional questions that you're going to have to answer. The good news, and Rob, I don't think New Jersey doesn't get their website up and running until a little bit later, right?
Yeah, they're a little they're behind, obviously. They're not ready to go on October 1st. And this year they've also they've taken out things they've asked for in the past. So they tried to streamline it.
Well, that's good news. Typically, the state has worked with the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, to have a link on the FAFSA that would take you to the state's website so that you can provide the additional information that they're asking for. However, if you file the downside to filing your FAFSA early is that their website is never ready to go on October 1st, and you're going to wind up having to go back in later and provide that information. My best advice would be do the FAFSA first, worry about the state later. Don't delay on doing your FAFSA because you're waiting on a link from the state. I would not advise that at all. Okay, so I'm just giving you a sample of what additional information the state is asking for. Again, just as a heads up, but when you work through the state website, they will guide you through whatever information they're requesting from you. So now I do have to warn you, and I'm just saying this not to confuse the issue, but I don't want you to walk away or next year say, wow, that lady didn't tell us about this. I've explained the FAFSA and the process for this year for 23-24. In 24-25, everything is going to be different. The Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education is radically overhauling the federal financial aid system. There are going to be a lot of changes. At this point, I would just go off of the information that I'm providing tonight, know in the back of your head that it's going to be different for the following year, and then you should consult with the financial aid office at the school that your son or daughter winds up attending. I think the schools are going to have to do a lot of work to educate the parents about those changes. I didn't want to confuse you all and spend a lot of time talking about it tonight, but I did want to just make mention of the fact that that's coming and that you should be aware of it. Okay, so I mentioned the CSS profile. Again, I'm not an expert on it because we don't use it, but I did want to give you the URL and a screenshot of what the CSS profile will look like if you have to do one. That's that. Okay, now I know Mrs. Kandari mentioned that there are some folks here that might be parents of juniors. For those of you that are juniors and you're just kind of starting your college search process this fall, it's important as you're going through that search process, it is important to understand, have a sense of cost. I mean, that's not the only reason that you that a student chooses a particular college, but it's an important factor to consider. And if you as a family know this is what we can afford, there's really no sense looking at a school that is, $30,000 more per year than what you can afford. It's just, simple mathematics. So to help students with that, about a dozen or so years ago, the Department of Ed created something called the Net Price Calculator. And every school in the country is required to have this on their website. And by putting in some basic demographic and financial data, the Net Price Calculator will give you a rough estimate of what your financial aid at that college might look like and what your approximate cost to attend might be. So it's not precise, it's not a guaranteed offer of aid, but it's accurate enough that it'll give you some guidance or so just an added piece of information as junior parents are doing their college search. So I always like to throw in information about this for the junior parents in the audience. Okay, so earlier I mentioned the financial aid package. Here's where we're going to get into some basic vocabulary. generally, when you do your FAFSA, the information goes to, it starts out with CPS, which is the federal government. They run it through their formulas and they send the information back to the student for you to review and make sure it's correct. If you're a New Jersey resident, it goes to New Jersey, and it goes to the colleges that you list on the FAFSA. Now, what do we all do with that? So the data that you supply is run through a formula, and it spits out something called the expected family contribution, or EFC. That's going to become a very important phrase, and you are going to hear that at every college in the country that you are dealing with. The reason for the EFC is to, years and years ago, it used to be what a family could expect to pay for school. That's the second big myth that I'm going to dispel for you tonight. It is not what you can expect to pay. So just kind of get that out of your mind. It's really just an index to compare the financial picture of one family to another, and kind of level the playing field. What I mean by that is, say that you have two families, each of whom make $100,000 a year. At face value, that sounds very similar. However, family number one is a family of three, two parents and one student going to college, who live in Eastern Idaho, where it's very inexpensive to live. And they have $500,000 in the bank. Family number two is a family of six, two parents, four kids, with all four kids in college at the same time. And as you might imagine, with four kids in college at the same time, they probably have very little money in the bank. And they happen to live in Bergen County, New Jersey, which is one of the most expensive counties in the country to live in. I think you would agree that those two financial pictures are very different. Those two families will also have very different EFCs. And that's why we have an eligibility index. But the thing that you need, if you take nothing else away from tonight's program, remember that the EFC is not what you're actually going to pay. So just kind of keep that in mind. EFC is, however, okay, so we talked about that. Another important concept that you're going to hear about is called cost of attendance. So attending college is more than just tuition and fees. It's also room and board, it's books and supplies, it's transportation, and then it's personal expenses that enable students to attend school. It could be, buying a computer. It could be a professional wardrobe for their internship. It's just, a component of it is personal expenses. And the other thing to keep in mind is that things like books and supplies, transportation, and the personal expenses, you have control over. They are not billed by the college. You won't be billed for those things, and you have control over how much you're going to spend on those things. But things like tuition and fees and room and board, they're obviously billed by the college. And if you were to talk to the billing office, those are the things that they're concerned about. They kind of don't care what you're spending on books and supplies, but the financial aid office is required to tell you that, you could expect to spend approximately $1,000 per year on books. So cost of attendance and the expected family contribution are two very important variables in determining something called financial need. And you're going to hear in the college search process and in the financial aid process, you're going to hear that phrase a lot. It's a very key concept, but it's a really, really simple formula. It's how much does it cost to attend? How much does the federal government think you could contribute toward education? And the difference is how much do you need to help you pay for school? Very simple formula. A lot of aid is driven by whether or not the student has need. The thing also to keep in mind, so there's something also that you need to understand, is that cost of attendance is going to vary from school to school. We all set our own cost of attendance. So what we establish at Monmouth may be different than at County College or at Seton Hall or at Rutgers. But the expected family contribution is the same. That travels with the student, no matter where you wind up. So your need is not going to be the same at every school. And I just use this slide to illustrate that point. In school number one, the cost of attendance is $35,000. The expected family contribution is $15,000. So that student's need is $20,000. However, at school number two, note that the cost of attendance is quite a bit higher. It's $60,000. The EFC is the same, as we noted, and that student's need at school number two is $45,000. So that would also explain, since most financial aid packages are based on financial need, your financial aid package may be different from one school to the next. And if it is, this very slide is why it's different. Okay, before we get into types of aid, just want to give you some general eligibility requirements. The student has to have either a high school diploma or a GED. They must be enrolled at a school that's eligible to offer financial aid. They must be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, and they have to have a valid social security number. So this is the part that everybody's really interested in, is what kind of financial aid is out there. To give you some basic vocabulary, generally financial aid comes in one of four forms. It either comes in a scholarship. Generally, when the word scholarship is used, it's meant as it's based on some sort of talent or merit. It could be academic talent, it could be a tuba scholarship for the band, or it could be art or something like that. It's free money, it doesn't have to be repaid. Generally, grants, when that word is used, generally those are based on financial need. See, I told you that that word was going to become important. Grants are also free, don't have to be repaid. Another phrase that you might hear when talking about grants and scholarships is gift aid. And it's a gift, it's free, you don't have to return it, you don't have to pay it back. But that is a phrase that you may hear some schools use. Another type of financial aid is the loan, as we've talked about before. And it's as the name implies, it's money borrowed and repaid with interest. Another thing that you might see in a financial aid package is work study or some sort of employment. And it's just like you or I, that students work and they receive a paycheck. My experience is that at 99.9% of institutions, the work study earnings are not applied to the student's account to reduce their balance with the school. The student just gets a check for the money that they've earned, and they can use it to help with gas or personal expenses or some such. Both loans and work study, because the student had to do something, those types of aid are referred to as self-help. That might be a phrase that you would hear. You don't see that a lot, but I just mention it so that you know what it is if you come across that word. Financial aid usually comes from one of 5 sources, either the federal government, the state government, the college or university itself, private sources, scholarships, loans. Sometimes employers offer some sort of tuition reimbursement or scholarship for the children of their employees. As the economy has gotten worse, aid from employers has gotten less and less. But I would suggest that you check with your human resources office to see what options may be available to you. As my mother always used to say to me, you don't ask, you don't get. But I wouldn't count on it, but it certainly doesn't hurt to ask about it. So to give you a sense of what types of aid programs are out there, and I'm going to do it by source. These are the programs that are available through the federal government. We have the Pell Grant, SEOG, TEACH, Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, Work Study, student loans, and PLUS loans, which are parent loans. And I'm going to give you a little more detailed information about each of those. The Pell Grant is based on financial need, and it's determined by the EFC. So the higher your need, the larger the grant. Each year, the amount is established by Congress. For 22-23, the amount is $68.95. The good news on the Pell Grant is that it is unlimited in supply. So if you meet the requirements and you're entitled to a Pell Grant, you will get it. The school has no control over the amount. We are literally given a chart of EFCs, and we plunk our finger down on the box where your EFC falls, and that's the amount that you get. The SEOG grant is also a federal grant, and it's kind of a twin to the Pell Grant. Usually, if you see Pell in the financial aid package, you're going to see some amount of SEOG. Awards can range from $100 to $4,000. The interesting thing about this is the federal government gives every school a pot of SEOG money to award, and allows the schools to kind of decide how they want to deal it out. This is most schools, for us, we do first come, first serve. I know roughly how many Pell Grant recipients I'm going to have every year, and I know what my pot is going to be approximately every year. So I choose to give everyone a little slice or a little piece of that. Other schools do it differently. My advice would be, if you see anything less than $4,000 in your package, ask them. I'm concerned about cost. I see that I've only gotten $300 of SEOG. Is there anything you can do to increase that? Doesn't hurt to ask. So the Iraq Afghanistan Service Grant is valued at the equivalent of the full Pell Grant, and it is for students who have had a parent killed, who was a member of the armed services, who was killed in Iraq or Afghanistan. If you do qualify for this, there's nothing further that you need to do, and the school will be notified of your entitlement, and they will ensure that the student gets what they are entitled to. The TEACH grant is for students who are interested in teaching in a high need field like ESL, like science, reading, math, in a low income school district. They can have a grant of up to $37.52 per year for 4 years, but there's a catch. They have to agree that within 8 years of graduation, they will have taught 4 years in that field in a low income district. If they don't, the grant reverts to a loan having accrued interest from the date that it was dispersed. If the student is very clear in their intention to teach, this may be something worthwhile looking into. Not all schools participate in the Teach Grant program. So you should, if this is applicable to your son or daughter, I would touch base with the financial aid office and see whether or not it's available at that particular school. Work study, as I said earlier, it's as the name implies, the student works at a job on campus, sometimes off campus. There are certain jobs that qualify for federal funding. It is not available at all schools. It's the school again, this is another situation where the school gets a pot of money from the federal government and they can determine how they want to spend it and how they award it. If you don't see it in your aid package, it's probably worth asking the question. Most financial aid offices, if they can accommodate you, they will add aid to the package. So, talking about loans for a bit, I know people get very scared about loans, but at the same time, we'll have students that will tell us, I paid part of my tuition on a credit card. A credit card is just a very expensive loan. The thing to remember about student loans is, first of all, they are an affordable way to finance an education. For example, for the 22-23 year, the interest rate on a subsidized loan is 4.99%. That's pretty good these days. And the interest on that is also tax deductible. And with a subsidized loan, it does not accrue interest while the student's in school. So basically, you're getting an interest-free loan for 4 years. The government is subsidizing or paying it. That's a pretty good deal. I think the other thing I could point to, a lot of research studies that say that students who have a financial stake in their education tend to perform better. Another, I think, advantage of having a student loan, there are some parents who are on this call that are thinking, it's my job to pay for school. I don't want my student to have loans. And that's fine. I would counter and say that you might want to consider letting your student have the loan. And if you choose to pay it off for them at the end, that's fine. The federal government doesn't care who the check comes from, as long as the check comes. The advantage to the student to that is that most students, when they graduate college, it's not that they have bad credit, it's that they have no credit. And one of the fastest ways to establish credit is a paid up student loan. So again, just something to think about. The federal government offers several different types of loans. The first is the subsidized loan, which I spoke a little bit about. And here goes that word again. The subsidized loan is based on financial need. The amount that students can borrow is based on their grade level. Freshmen can borrow up to $3,500 per year, sophomores $4,500, and juniors and seniors $5,500. The logic behind that is that as a student progresses through grade level, they are more likely to complete their degree. And if they complete their degree, they're more likely to repay their loan. So that's why the amount goes up as a student goes through school. The interest rate on the loan is fixed for the life of the loan, although Congress sets interest rates each year. With an unsubsidized loan, it is not need-based. So even a student who doesn't have financial need can get that $3,500, $4,500, $5,500. But this time, since they don't have financial need, it is accruing interest while they are in school. Generally, with those, I would recommend, if you can manage it, to pay the quarterly interest on it. That way you're not paying interest on interest. In addition to this loan for students who don't have financial need, every student, regardless of their level of need, is also entitled to another $2,000 in unsubsidized funding. So the Federal Plus loan is the parent loan for undergraduate students. And for most students, there's a gap between the grants and scholarships and loans that the student is being offered and what that cost of attendance is. And the challenge for parents is to figure out how you're going to cover that gap. One of the ways that some parents do that is through the Parent Plus loan. It is through the federal government. It is based on credit history. You can borrow up to that cost of attendance that we mentioned earlier, less any other aid that the student receives. The loan accrues interest from the moment of the second disbursement, which is usually the spring semester. For 22-23, the interest rate is 7.54%, which is fixed for the life of the loan. And also depending upon your income level, may be tax deductible. So that's an option for you. As you can see, this next group of aid programs is through the state of New Jersey for students who are attending school in New Jersey, with the exception of the NJ Class loan. The good news on the NJ Class loan is that the student can either be a New Jersey resident attending school in New Jersey, or it could be a New Jersey resident attending school outside of New Jersey, or it could be a non-Jersey resident attending school in New Jersey. So it's very versatile. But what you'll notice with the amount of aid programs that are offered by the state of New Jersey, I believe New Jersey is 5th in the country in its spending on higher education for its residents. And that's, New Jersey has a long history of that, and something that we as a state can be proud of. I think, so with regard to the state aid programs, I've given you the URL for the state's website, www.hesa.org. That is the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. So that if you were interested and wanted to read a little bit more about each of those aid programs, that information is available to you. Remember that I said that another source of aid is the college or university itself. Most schools offer scholarship and grant programs. Most of them offer employment. There are some schools that do offer institutional loans. My experience has been that if the school does it at all, it's not a lot of money. So it's not like every student is being offered, we're going to give you $20,000 in an institutional loan to cover that gap. It's more like a couple of $1,000s here or there if you've exhausted your options. But that's certainly something that you can ask the aid office about to see if they do offer it. In managing that gap, many families choose to use a payment plan. My experience has been that pretty much every college or university offers some form of a payment plan. Some of them are monthly, some of them are you break the year's payment up into four payments. The terms and conditions are going to vary from institution to institution. So that's certainly an option that you can ask the school about to see if they even offer it. So I talked about outside sources. That can be, as I said, through employers. If you're a veteran, through the VA benefits. You can do private loans. this slide, I've called it supplemental, but it's a private loan to help you cover that gap. That may be, we're going to come from places like Sallie Mae or Discover, Citizens Bank are some of the players in that loan game. Most colleges and universities will make some suggestions about loans that you can look at. But the reality is they will process any loan that you, they're required to process any loan that you want them to process. Private scholarships, do your homework. As Mrs. Kandari mentioned earlier, on the school's portal, there's information about scholarships. This time of year, parents of seniors, you want to sit your kids down and you want to crack the whip and you want to have them doing those scholarship applications, because every year, millions of dollars in scholarships go unclaimed because students don't want to write an essay or do an application. Again, if you got to be in it to win it. If you don't apply, you're certainly not going to get considered for it. So I would use the school's portal. I've also given you a website, FastWeb, which is a free scholarship search engine that may help you in that process as well. Okay, so I promised you some tricks and tips to the trade. Remember earlier, we talked about you're using 2-year-old income data. Well, we all know that life happens. For example, the people of Florida have just been decimated. Life happened. That is going to change for many people. They're going to be out of work. They're going to have expenses that aren't covered by insurance. Life happens. People get divorced. The wage earner dies. Things happen. Unfortunately, the FAFSA does not take into account these personal circumstances. So the feds created something called special circumstances, or professional judgment is another way you might hear it referred to, where you're asking the school to consider a set of unusual circumstances that impacted your finance. Now, what I will tell you is that even though the Department of Education created this concept, they didn't really tell the schools how it had to be. So every school gets to make up its own rules. So if you find yourself in those circumstances, communicate directly with the financial aid office. It's sometimes hard to talk about some of these things, but I think, if you're open and honest with the aid office, they're there to help. And trust me, I've been doing this almost 35 years and I've heard it all at this point. And most people in the financial aid office are not judgy or preachy about things. They're there to help. So don't be awkward or embarrassed about it, and just be open in your communication. Remember that the Fed said that we had to have the policy. They didn't say that we have to make any adjustment. There may be circumstances that each school may or may not consider. So for example, at Monmouth, my policy is that we will only consider things that are beyond the student or family's control. So for example, I don't want to get a letter saying, we spent $30,000 on our older daughter's wedding. That was a choice. We pay Catholic school tuition. That's a choice. I mean, obviously that doesn't apply to you guys, but we all make choices about how we spend our money. So my policy is that it has to be beyond control, beyond your control. And kind of keep in mind that submitting a request is not a guarantee that anything's going to happen. Also keep in mind that, if you say, oh, my income is $20,000 less now than it was 2 years ago, the financial aid counselor may, they grant your request and they do the math, And in that whole EFC formula that we talked about, while that $20,000 may be a big deal to you and your family and how you pay your bills, it may not impact the EFC or your financial aid. And it doesn't mean that the aid office is being uncooperative. It's just how the numbers worked. So I'm just sort of preparing you for that. You know, and I guess in that process, and Rob could probably speak to this, be kind to your financial aid officer. You know, they're just doing what they're required to do in the way that they're required to do it. And, you know, you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar. You know, try to make it a positive experience for yourself and the financial aid office. So here are some things that I want you to think about. Read your mail. Financial aid, a lot of times has deadlines. Financial aid people love deadlines. Some of them are institutional and they're changeable. There are some, for example, like the state has some filing deadlines that if you missed it, you missed it. There's nothing the school can do to help you. And so you don't want to miss out on some aid because you threw your mail in a junk drawer and you forgot to read it. So be careful of deadlines. Read instructions. Like I said, we like to give bulleted lists and we like to give you instructions. Read the instructions, ask questions if you don't understand. Check everything over before you submit it. You know, you don't want to lose out or, you know, make things take longer because of mistakes. In the digital age, there's really no reason not to keep copies of everything you submit. The reality is, you know, while the financial aid office tries to be respectful of your documents and you know, we try not to lose stuff. The fact of the matter is that we're human and we have lots of stuff, lots of paper coming through the aid office, and sometimes things get misfiled. I mean, most offices use a digital filing system, but sometimes it gets attached to the wrong record or gets misplaced. And even though Rob would humbly call you and humbly apologize that he may have lost your document, and you can get as mad at Rob as you want to get, you still have to provide the document. So, and it's, if you keep copies of it, it just makes everybody's life easier. This is another one of my favorites, is don't sign your son or daughter's name to things. Moms, your handwriting looks nothing like the handwriting of an 18-year-old boy. And we know the difference. These are federal documents. Do not sign your kid's name to them. The corollary to that is don't share passwords. You know, most schools these days, just like in the high school, they have a portal. Most schools have a way to get parent access to that portal. Do it the right way. Get the user ID and password. Don't use your kid's password. You know, it's just a data security kind of thing. This is also important as parents. You know, your job is to take this little baby bird and nurture it for 17 or 18 years and get it strong enough to be grown and to fly the nest. And part of flying the nest is learning how to adult. And one piece of adulting is managing your finances. And this is probably going to be one of the last great lessons that you're going to teach your children. So involve them in these conversations and teach them and guide them while you're here to back them up. The other thing, and I would say a fair amount of you probably have kids who are considering going away to school, is they're the ones on campus. And if they don't know what's going on and you send them to the financial aid office and they do the, my mom sent me, we have no idea what they need or how to help. It just makes it harder to help them if they don't know what's going on. So try to keep them in the loop. Talk to the financial aid office. You know, my crystal ball has been broken for nearly 30 years. If I don't know you need help, I can't help you. So be in regular communication. If something comes up, talk to us and let us help you figure out a solution. And let's help you navigate the process. Don't, just keep us in the know. If you don't communicate with us, we can't help you. Okay, this is just your public service announcement for this evening. There are a lot of services that will offer, for a mere $2,000. I'm going to help you apply for and find financial aid. There's actually someone on the internet now, I think she goes by the financial aid guru. And for, I think it's $2,000, you can take her master class on financial aid. Please don't fall for that. These people are scam artists, in my opinion. They are not going to tell you anything that you couldn't find for yourself by doing a little internet research, or that you couldn't find out by contacting the financial aid office. Or quite honestly, if you have a question that you just can't get an answer to, contact Mrs. Kandari. She will get a hold of me and I will get you an answer. All right. Don't waste your money on this. You have better things to do with your money. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now, but that was just my public service announcement for the evening. Okay, so I've given you some contact information for Monmouth's financial aid office on social media. Even if you're not interested in Monmouth, I would recommend at least maybe following us on Facebook or Twitter, because we often post, especially this time of year, we're making posts on here's how to file the FAFSA, or here's what you do, or here's a scholarship opportunity, or here's what this means. We use it as an informational source, and maybe you'll get some of your questions answered that way. Okay, I have spewed a lot of information at you. That concludes my presentation. I hope you've been keeping Rob busy in the chat room, and I hope that you've gotten your questions answered. As I said, if something happens after you go home and you've had a chance to review the presentation when it's posted tomorrow, and you have additional questions, I would say contact Mrs. Kandari, and we'll figure out how to get an answer for your question. I thank you all very much for your time tonight. I hope you got what you came for, and I certainly wish you well with your sons and daughters in the college search process. Enjoy this last time with them, and try to make it as enjoyable and stress-free as possible. I know that's sometimes easier said than done, but enjoy the ride with them while you do this. Good luck to you all.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much. Thank you, parents, for attending. As Claire mentioned, you can reach out to me in the guidance office, or you can go through your child's own school counselor, who will come to me and we will help get you answers. Good luck and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Take care.